There is one place on Earth that still feels like another world. A place where the sun can disappear for months, where temperatures can plunge below -80 degrees Celsius, and where winds powerful enough to flip vehicles race across an endless sea of ice. No cities, no permanent population, no nation truly owns it. Nearly 70% of the world's fresh water is locked beneath its frozen surface, hiding mountain ranges, ancient rivers, and lakes that have remained sealed off for millions of years. Today, we know this place as Antarctica, but for almost all of human history, nobody even knew it existed. And that's perhaps the greatest mystery of all. How could an entire continent remain hidden until the 19th century? The answer isn't just the story of Antarctica. It's the story of imagination, exploration, survival, and one of humanity's greatest adventures. This is the complete history of Antarctica. It's difficult to imagine today, but Antarctica was not always a frozen desert. Travel back more than 100 million years, and the landscape would have been almost unrecognizable. Instead of endless white ice, dense forests stretched toward the horizon. Towering conifers and ancient ferns covered the land. Dinosaurs wandered beneath trees that experienced months of darkness each winter, yet survived in a surprisingly mild climate. The continent we associate with ice was once alive with rivers, forests, and wildlife. How was that possible? The answer lies deep in Earth's geological history. Hundreds of millions of years ago, Antarctica formed part of an enormous supercontinent known as Gondwana. Joined together with South America, Africa, Australia, India, and Madagascar, Antarctica occupied a very different position on Earth. Over millions of years, the continents slowly drifted apart. Then came the event that changed Antarctica forever. Around 34 million years ago, Antarctica finally separated from South America, allowing a powerful ocean current to circle the continent uninterrupted. Known today as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, it isolated Antarctica from the warmer oceans to the north. Without that warmth, temperatures collapsed. Snow that once melted each summer began to survive year after year. Over millions of years, it compressed into ice. That ice grew thicker and thicker until an entire continent disappeared beneath it. Today, in some places, the Antarctic ice sheet is nearly 5 kilometers thick. Beneath it lie ancient mountains, rivers, and forests. Silent reminders of a world that vanished long before humans appeared. But humanity knew nothing about this transformation. For thousands of years, Antarctica remained completely unknown, or so it seemed. Long before anyone saw Antarctica, people believed it had to exist. The idea emerged in ancient Greece more than 2,000 years ago. Scholars studying the world noticed that most known land lay in the northern hemisphere. To them, the Earth seemed unbalanced. Surely, they reasoned, there must be another great landmass somewhere in the far south. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. It wasn't based on exploration. It wasn't based on evidence. It was based on philosophy. Yet the idea proved remarkably persistent. For centuries, mapmakers drew an enormous southern continent across the bottom of their maps. Its shape changed from one generation to the next. Sometimes it connected to South America. Sometimes it stretched toward Africa. Sometimes it surrounded the South Pole entirely. Nobody had ever seen it, but almost everyone believed it was there. As European exploration accelerated during the 15th and 16th centuries, sailors crossed oceans that had once seemed impossible. The Portuguese rounded Africa. The Spanish crossed the Atlantic. New lands appeared on maps with astonishing speed. Yet the mysterious southern continent refused to reveal itself. Every voyage farther south encountered the same enemies: towering waves, freezing temperatures, dense fog, and floating mountains of ice. Many captains simply turned back. Those who continued discovered that the Southern Ocean was unlike any sea they had ever sailed. The farther south they traveled, the more violent nature became. Still, the belief endured. If Terra Australis wasn't where people expected, then where was it? Eventually, one explorer decided to answer that question once and for all. His name was James Cook. By the late 18th century, Captain James Cook had become one of the greatest navigators of his age. He had mapped coastlines with extraordinary precision and crossed vast stretches of the Pacific. Now he faced perhaps the greatest geographical mystery of all. Was there truly a southern continent? In 1772, Cook sailed south with two ships, the Resolution and the Adventure. The farther he traveled, the harsher the world became. Towering icebergs drifted silently through dark waters. Sea ice stretched endlessly across the horizon. Snowstorms swallowed entire landscapes. Then, on January 17, 1773, Cook achieved something no human had done before. He crossed the Antarctic Circle. It was a remarkable milestone. Humanity had entered the most remote part of the planet. Again and again, Cook searched for a route through the sea ice. Again and again, Antarctica refused him. Several times, he came astonishingly close to the continent itself, closer than anyone before him. Yet the ice never relented. Eventually, Cook reached a conclusion. If a southern continent existed, it lay beyond an almost impenetrable barrier of ice. He believed no one would ever travel farther south than he had. History would prove him wrong. Although Cook never saw Antarctica, he achieved something just as important. He demonstrated that the mythical, fertile southern continent imagined by ancient geographers did not exist. Whatever lay beyond the ice, it was something entirely different. And only a few decades later, 3 separate expeditions would race toward that frozen horizon, each believing they might become the first people in history to discover Earth's final continent. By the early 19th century, the mystery of the southern continent had reached a turning point. Whaling and sealing ships were pushing farther south than ever before, chasing valuable fur seals into waters few sailors dared to enter. At the same time, several nations launched scientific expeditions to explore what still remained one of the largest blank spaces on Earth's maps. Then, in 1820, history changed forever. Remarkably, no one can say with absolute certainty who discovered Antarctica first. Within the space of a few days, 3 separate expeditions from 3 different nations all claimed the historic achievement. The first was a Russian expedition led by Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen and Mikhail Lazarev. Sailing through dangerous ice-filled waters, they reported seeing an immense wall of ice that many historians believe was the Antarctic continent itself. Just days later, British naval officer Edward Bransfield charted mountainous land along what is now the Antarctic Peninsula. Later that year, American sealer Nathaniel Palmer also reported seeing the continent. Unlike many famous discoveries in history, Antarctica wasn't revealed in one dramatic moment. Instead, it slowly emerged from the fog. One expedition saw an icy coastline. Another mapped a mountain range. Another landed on islands nearby. Together, they transformed a centuries-old myth into reality. The final continent had been found. But discovering Antarctica was only the beginning. The greatest challenge wasn't finding it. It was surviving it. No place on Earth has tested human endurance quite like Antarctica. At the dawn of the 20th century, A new generation of explorers arrived with far more ambitious goals. They no longer wanted to glimpse the coastline. They wanted to conquer the continent itself. Historians now call this period the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The name could hardly be more fitting. These men traveled without satellites, without aircraft, without GPS, without modern weather forecasts. Everything depended on courage, experience, and determination. Every journey into the Antarctic interior was a step into the unknown. Among the greatest names was Roald Amundsen. Originally planning to explore the Arctic, Amundsen secretly changed course after learning that others had likely reached the North Pole before him. His new objective was even greater: the South Pole. At exactly the same time, British explorer Robert Falcon Scott was preparing for the very same goal. The race was on. Amundsen relied on careful planning, expert skiing, and teams of sled dogs perfectly suited to polar travel. Scott's expedition faced mechanical failures, unsuitable transport, and increasingly brutal conditions. On the 14th of December 1911, Amundsen planted the Norwegian flag at the geographic South Pole. For Norway, it was one of the greatest achievements in the history of exploration. Just over a month later, Scott finally reached the pole. Instead of triumph, he found Amundsen's tent. His dream had vanished weeks earlier. The return journey became one of history's greatest tragedies. Exhausted, freezing, and running out of supplies, Scott and his companions died on the ice only a short distance from safety. When rescuers eventually discovered their tent, Scott's diary lay beside him, preserving one of exploration's most moving accounts of courage and sacrifice. Yet perhaps the greatest Antarctic story belongs to another man entirely: Ernest Shackleton. In 1914, Shackleton set out to achieve what no one had attempted before: crossing Antarctica from coast to coast. His ship, the Endurance, never even reached land. It became trapped in sea ice. For months, the crew drifted helplessly, while the crushing pressure slowly destroyed the ship. Eventually, the Endurance sank beneath the frozen sea. Most expeditions would have ended there. Shackleton refused to give up. Against almost impossible odds, he led every one of his 27 men to safety. His expedition failed. His leadership became legendary. By the early 1920s, the great age of exploration was over. Humanity had reached the South Pole, crossed glaciers, mapped coastlines, and proved that Antarctica, although unimaginably hostile, could be explored. The next great challenge would not belong to explorers. It would belong to scientists. As the decades passed, Antarctica changed from a place of conquest into a place of discovery. Researchers uncovered fossils proving that Antarctica had once been covered in forests. They discovered mountain ranges hidden beneath kilometers of ice. Then came one of the greatest scientific collaborations in history. During the International Geophysical Year, scientists from around the world worked together to study Antarctica despite the growing tensions of the Cold War. The success of that cooperation inspired something unprecedented. In 1959, 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty. Instead of dividing Antarctica between competing nations, they agreed that the continent would be used exclusively for peaceful purposes and scientific research. Military activity was prohibited. Nuclear testing was banned. Scientific discoveries would be shared internationally. Even today, Antarctica remains the only continent governed in this remarkable way. In a world often divided by politics, Antarctica became a symbol of cooperation. Despite more than 2 centuries of exploration, Antarctica continues to surprise us. Beneath its ice lies an entire hidden world. Scientists have discovered enormous mountain ranges buried beneath kilometers of ice. Hundreds of subglacial lakes remain sealed away from the outside world. The largest of these, Lake Vostok, has been isolated for millions of years. Its waters may preserve clues about how life survives in extreme environments, knowledge that could even help scientists search for life on icy moons elsewhere in our solar system. Then there is Blood Falls. For decades, explorers were baffled by a waterfall that appeared to bleed from the ice. The explanation turned out to be every bit as fascinating as the mystery. Iron-rich water, trapped beneath the glacier for countless years, flows to the surface where it reacts with oxygen, turning a deep crimson red. Reality, once again, proved stranger than imagination. Antarctica has also yielded meteorites older than Earth itself, ancient fossil forests, active volcanoes hidden beneath the ice, and some of the oldest climate records ever recovered. Each discovery reminds us of something remarkable. Antarctica isn't simply preserving its own history, it's preserving the history of our planet. For thousands of years, Antarctica existed only in human imagination. Ancient scholars believed it had to exist. Explorers risked everything trying to find it. Some never returned. Others changed history forever. From a land of dinosaurs and forests, to the last continent discovered by humanity, to the world's greatest scientific laboratory, Antarctica has lived many lives. Today, it remains one of the least understood places on Earth, not because we haven't explored it, but because every discovery reveals another mystery waiting beneath the ice. Perhaps that's why Antarctica continues to capture our imagination. It reminds us that even in an age of satellites and supercomputers, there are still places capable of inspiring genuine wonder. For centuries, Antarctica was the last blank space on the map. Today, it is the last great frontier of science. And if history has taught us anything, it's this: the greatest discoveries are often waiting in the places we understand the least. If you enjoyed this journey through the complete history of Antarctica, don't forget to subscribe, because in our next documentary, we'll explore one of the greatest survival stories ever told: the incredible, heroic age of Antarctic exploration, where ordinary men faced extraordinary odds in humanity's greatest battle against nature.